In this video, we will build a to-do list app without any frameworks using only JavaScript and TypeScript. We will use Vite to scaffold our project. Let's call our project to-do app TypeScript. Select vanilla for the framework with TypeScript. Then let's go ahead and install our dependencies. I'm going to open up VS Code. And then I will start the development server. And then open Chrome in our development URL. Here we can see that we have a lot of boilerplate code that we can just get rid of it immediately. To double check that everything is working okay, let's console log this line, and there it is. Great. Next, we will add a couple of HTML sections on our index file. One with ID controls, which is going to contain our input type text and a button to add our to-do. And a second section which is going to contain our to-do list items. We are going to add an input type checkbox on each item. And also we want to have our text on a span element. We will see later why we're doing this. Now with TypeScript, we can get a reference to the to-do input element by doing document.getElementById. To get the benefits of types, we can tell our TypeScript that this is going to be an HTML input element, and we can do the same for our button. Let's make sure we have an ID. And this one is going to be an HTML button element. To work with interactivity, we can add an event to our to-do add button. In this case, we want to listen for any click that happens. Let's make sure that this is working as expected. We should see the logs. Yep, there it is. So now when my button is clicked, I want to get access to the value that is in the to-do input. Let's console log the output that we get right now when we click the button. Perfect. Next, what we want to do is add our new item at the end of the list. To do that, we need to get a reference to our unordered list. Like that. Let's update this. And this is our actual to-do list. Okay, so next steps here is we're going to create a list element. Each list element will need a checkbox and a span. We want to replicate this structure here. Okay, so we also need to add the to-do text into the new span. We need to add the input and the span to the list element. And finally, add the list element to our to-do list. So let's do this step by step. To create a new list element is just as simple as that. We're basically creating the list element in our constant li. Then we're going to create a input type checkbox. We can just call it checkbox. And then after that, we're going to say this is going to be a type checkbox. Cool. We're going to create the span, same steps. And the span is going to now receive the to-do text. So inner text like that. Now that we have all the elements that we need, we are going to build our full list element. We can append a child. First, let's do the checkbox, and then we are going to do the span. Before we add this to the to-do list, let's console log our list element to see what happens. Cool. So we have list element, the input type checkbox, and the test text. Great. So since we have the reference to to-do list, we can just go and say to-do list, append child, list element. And now when we add a new item, this is going to show below the fourth item. Great. So that seems to be working okay. Let's clean up all these comments. Let's now add a CSS class to our span. So when our checkbox is actually checked, this will show a different style. For now, we're going to start with hard coding it. Let's start with the ID checked. And we can say our text decoration will be line through. So this is how it should look the moment we check a task. Of course, for the rest of the items, this is not working because this is hard-coded here. So let's work on that interaction now. What we want to do is when we click our checkbox, we want to tell our HTML that this element should have a new class. To do this, we need to unique identifier to each list element. Then we can add a data attribute to the check box referencing the list ID. Now let's just remove all the hard-coded elements in our to-do list. Let's add a unique ID on each element added to our list. We can use date.now to create a basic, simple, unique string. There it is. We're going to use a data attribute in our checkbox. Its value is going to be the ID of the list element. In this way, they can reference each other, so we can easily target the elements inside of the list item. So now when we add a new item, we are going to see that the list ID has the same value as the data to do. So now what's going to happen is we're going to add an event listener on the checkbox. We can add an event listener on click. We're going to capture the mouse event, which is the click. Here we can target the to do that we want to find. Now when we click here, we need to go and find this element. So now that we have the ID that we grabbed from the data attribute, we can use it and trying to find the span by using the ID and navigating through the DOM until we find the span that's inside the ID that we are passing here. So if there is a span, we are going to update the class name to either checked or empty. So let's take a look. New element. I'm going to click here, and now we can see that the class was checked. If I click again, the class will be removed. Let's add a few, and that's it. Something nice that we can do here in our app is once we create a new element, we should make this input empty. We can do it right here. So test2. Great. So what if we now want to make this button disabled if there's no text in our input? To do that, first of all, we need to start with the button disabled, like so. So now I can't click this one because it's disabled. How can we make this so as soon as I enter text, this button becomes enabled again, becomes clickable? Well, we are going to listen for changes on our input element. And once the value of the input element is different than empty, we enable the button. So just with this change, now we should be logging every change. The problem with the change event is that it's going to react only when we move the focus out of the input. So instead of change, we should use key up. Let's see. Great. On each keystroke, we are logging the value. So if the input value is different than empty, we remove the disabled attribute on our button. Let's use a ternary operator. And that should take care of it. Item 2. But we can see here that as soon as I add my to-do, this button is not becoming disabled. And that is because there is technically no key up event happening when we add our to-do. So here, after we append the elements, let's say also make the disabled element true. And that's it. So I'm going to add a link in the description with the code in GitHub so you can take a look at it in more detail. Let me know in the comments if there is any other topic that you would like to see. And yeah, I might create a new video. Thank you.